We are talking about the spooky folklore-themed horror movie Village in the Woods, also known as Harbour. This one is directed and co-written by Rain McCormack and stars Richard Hope, Teresa Bradley, Rebecca Johnson and Robert Vernon. So this is, when you watch this movie, you'll be reminded of both classic Hammer horror movies from yesteryear and also the movie and video game Silent Hill. So what is the story? Well, we have this couple who travel to this remote village in the woods, and they are there as part of a con. They have got basically some details in regards to essentially conning their way into inheriting a pub. They intend to then sell it on and obviously make some money back. So they are posing to be someone who is what used to be living at this village, essentially now grown up. And when they're there, they kind of meet these strange, kind of like overly friendly local residents, all who seem to be thrilled to have them there, outside of one guy who is essentially squatting in the upstairs kind of apartment in this pub. And this village seems to be constantly kind of covered in a thick mist. And there seems to maybe something sinister, something untoward going on that may well involve some type of ritual sacrifice, things like this. Not going to go too much into it, but obviously you have seen movies like, you know, kind of the folklore horror, old kind of like pagan rituals, things like that, demology, it's all in there. That's what all we'll say in regards to the plot. So what do I think of this movie? I loved the atmosphere in this movie. I mean, the cinematography here is amazing. This village in the woods, the way it's kind of filmed, I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous but horrifying, if that makes sense. It really does look like, you know, a place like that's been kept in a time bubble. This kind of rural, run-down kind of a few houses that we kind of see along with this kind of pub looks absolutely fantastic. And the way they admittedly overuse some of the mist sometimes, you know, it must be said, but nonetheless, I do think it absolutely has this great creepy atmosphere. The use of certain kind of sound effects and sound design here to accentuate the kind of the fear here is excellent. There's also some really fun characters here. The inhabitants of this particular village, particularly our two main ones, a woman called Maddie, who is like this kind of like this older temptress type character, who, again, it just reminds me of the classic days of kind of like your Hammer horror, where you used to have, you know, Ingrid Pitt and Carolyn Monroe in there. Just kind of reminded me so much of those kind of days and those actresses back in those movies. But you've also got the kind of like the gentleman there who seems to be, you know, something's not quite right. You can kind of tell without the movie sort of spelling it out for you. You think, oh, something's kind of sinister here. He seems all kind of pleasant, but there's something else going on beneath the waves, so to speak. I thought the characters here were fantastic. Maybe our main kind of protagonist characters may be a little bland, but I actually really enjoyed the kind of the inhabitants of the actual village itself. And I've got to say, I think the dialogue was all pretty good. I actually quite found the dialogue quite natural between our two protagonists, and deliberately kind of somewhat kind of over-enunciated maybe by our kind of villagers. But again, I think it works for the film. There are some creepy moments in regards to them. This is not really like a jump scares movie, but there are some good moments of tension and just some kind of like fantastic set design. The way, you know, you have all these kind of little kind of like Blair Witch style kind of like ornaments hanging from the ceilings. The way that they're casually kind of making a pyre to clearly burn someone and things like that. And I thought it all worked pretty well here. So this movie, the story is quite a slow burn, but I feel it works for this kind of movie. And because of the excellent kind of groundwork done by the film to begin with, it makes it, you even though it's a slow film, you are kind of engaged throughout, I feel, because you kind of want to know the kind of the mystery and what's actually kind of going on. Effects work is kept to a minimal. I'd say it works most of the time. There's one effect shot at the end where I feel is a little bit sloppy, and they've used CGI over practical effects, and it would have benefited from using practical. But there's a similar effect early on in the movie, and it looks a lot better there. Because I believe it looks like it's more practical, but why they just didn't use the same prop, I don't know. But there you go. But what doesn't work? Okay. So, like I've mentioned, I feel our protagonist characters are somewhat bland, especially when you compare their kind of characters to the actual villagers themselves. So, to be fair, get a lot less screen time, but come across so much better because their characters are so kind of interesting. So, our central protagonists, although I feel they're fairly well acted, aren't particularly interesting. This movie has a weird problem as well, in the fact that it sometimes really goes OTT with exposition, where we have just someone literally just telling you essentially huge plot points, and just kind of like 5-minute scenes where someone's kind of just telling you stuff and in a huge exposition dump. So there is an issue with that. But at the same time, I also think things aren't properly explained. How they have got to, how our couple get to this village in regards to the circumstances leading up to it. We do see a flashback, but to me it wasn't really enough to know what the actual, how they've got to that point to begin with, and where they've come from, and how do they know this third party that was kind of involved. It doesn't really give you much, to be honest, and it just seems a little bit, the plot hinges on it quite a lot. So it seemed like you needed further exploration within this kind of setup for it to really kind of make sense. I mean, you get the idea. Okay, they are planning to kind of con their way into this pub, but we don't know how they've got involved in it. Really, that much. There's not enough there, unfortunately. And then when we get to the end, I feel again some things are just without kind of going into spoilers. There's the reason why there is someone up above the pub, I don't know. It's never really explained why, how have they always been there. And we get some throwaway lines like "no one ever leaves" and things like that, but it's never really, we don't really anything more than that. They just seem to be stuck up there, and I don't know. Doesn't really need a little bit more to it, I think. So although I think this movie is a fantastic exercise in atmosphere, I feel the story and script-wise, it's a little lacking. Like I said, lacking in character development for our main protagonists, and I think some plot points could have been handled differently. I think some needed a little more explanation, and others needed to be handled in a less exposition-heavy way. But I feel, on a visual standpoint, it kind of makes up with some fantastic visual work here, and some really kind of kooky and interesting characters from our villagers. What do I think about this movie? I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I do think it's actually still worth a watch, and will keep you engaged, I feel. If you like a slower burn, more kind of Midsummer style, Wicker Man stuff type, ritual style movie. 6 out of 10. If you've seen it, what did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.